The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 128. On a rainy, overcast homecoming day, Michigan shut down and shut out the Fighting Illini 45-0. Next on the agenda, putting an end to the streak. Today we preview Michigan versus Michigan State.
Oh man, Euchre's been broadcasting for 27 years. I have never seen anything like this. They need 2 inches. Dennis Franklin, the quarterback, taking a long con from center. He heads off to Shuttlesworth 5, and it's down to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Dennis Franklin! Oh my God, Dennis Franklin fooled everybody. He fooled me. He fooled the entire Ohio State team. Kneeling is Larry Gustafson. Attempting will be Super Toe. Super Toe will kick the 30-yard field goal. It's good to send over there. It's a tied-up ball game. 10-10. Okay. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Carter's down. Oh my God! Carter scored. Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going in the end zone. Carter got the pass. In the air, it's done. Buford is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
This is the Michigan Man Podcast. On GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. For Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On today's show, we preview Saturday's long-awaited clash between Michigan and Michigan State. On our visitor segment, we'll be joined by Spartan beat writer Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press. He'll give us his take on what's gone wrong for Sparty so far this season. Then on Michigan Gameday, the associate editor of the Wolverine, Michael Spath, will drop by with a few thoughts on the Illini victory and tell us what Michigan needs to do to finally end the streak. On My View from Section 17 this week, it was a gloomy, wet day last Saturday in Ann Arbor for homecoming. Michigan came out and pounded the Illini with the running game, getting contributions from 4 running backs, including Denard Robinson. On defense, Michigan played fast and suffocated Nathan Scheelhaas and the Fighting Illini offense. Illinois couldn't get anything going, and after Scheelhaas left the game with an injury late in the first half, they were, for all intent and purpose, done. It was a resounding and complete victory for Coach Brady Hoke and his team. We know who's next, and we know what's at stake. The Spartans are reeling after an overtime loss, a double overtime loss to Iowa last week in East Lansing. State lost a game in which they had only allowed Iowa 95 yards of total offense heading into the fourth quarter. The offensive line has lost 2 starters this season, and first-year quarterback Andrew Maxwell has had to deal with receivers that can't seem to hold on to anything. The defense has been very good, but the offense has not found its way yet. Still, this is the game for the Spartans. We will most certainly get their best shot. On the other side, Michigan is coming off back-to-back dominant performances to open the Big Ten season. For the Wolverines, the goals are many, proving they can consistently move the chains against a top-tier defense, staying on course for a shot at the division title and a trip to Indy for the Big Ten championship game, and last, and far from least, ending the streak. While this year's matchup might not garner nationwide interest, it really doesn't matter. What matters is what this game means to the young men on both sidelines, their fans, and the impact the outcome will have for both teams on so many levels as the season progresses. The atmosphere should be electric at the Big House on Saturday afternoon, and when the sun sets on the day, both sides will have answers to these questions. Can the Spartans overcome that grueling overtime loss to Iowa last Saturday and finally put together 4 quarters of offense? For Michigan, have the last 2 weeks been a sign of things to come and the beginning of a run to the Big Ten title? Those questions and more will be answered this Saturday as these 2 bitter rivals lock horns for what should be a physical and tough Big Ten game. Next on our visitor segment, we're going to hear from the guy who knows the Spartans inside and out. Beat writer Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press. Right here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Our guest today is Michigan State beat writer Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this one. Should be really interesting.
Oh, I think we're all, at least in the state of Michigan, looking forward to this. You mentioned in Sunday's Free Press that the defensive numbers for the Spartans were good against Iowa, and really they've been pretty darn good all season. But giving up big plays at the worst possible times continues to plague this defense, doesn't it?
I mean, it does. Two in the past 3 weeks especially. Of course, the defense played well throughout the second half at Indiana after a really bad start. But, Ohio State, of course, Michigan State got the lead in the second half, fought hard to do anything on offense in that game. Got the lead and immediately gave it up with a 63-yard bomb. And then late in the game, of course, pinned Ohio State deep in its own end and let them run out the final 5 minutes with 9 running plays, or 4 minutes plus with 9 running plays. So, again, other than that, it was a great defensive effort. Ohio State scored 17 points, but then you look at last week, Iowa had less than 90 yards as the third quarter was winding down and ended up with about 260. And, just the fourth quarter, I think part of that may have been Michigan State wearing down a little bit. Mark Wiseman, powerful running back, but, some mistakes too, just some mistakes, maybe mistakes in a couple calls Pat Narduzzi made, or just, one or two players out of position, giving up a bomb on 2nd and 26 in the Iowa 16. And it's had this strange knack for, making the critical mistake.
Well, the weather on Saturday and missing Deion Sims impacted the Spartan offense. But the running game was solid. And Aaron Burbridge, to me anyway, continues to show he really has big playability. But the offense as a whole was pretty good against the Hawkeyes, but just not good enough to win, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. There were some strides made. I think definitely the running game in Iowa. It's not loaded with stars up front as it is some years, and this is kind of a rebuilding up front, but still a pretty solid. And they're always going to be solid, up front. And I was surprised that Michigan State ran it as well as it did. I think they're maybe a little bit of chemistry gained in the offensive line. They went with the same 5 guys throughout the game, and of course they've been a little banged up, on the offensive line. But there were some strides made there, like you said. Aaron Burbridge, another big week. But of course, Andrew Maxwell's 12 of 31. You can definitely blame the weather for some of that. And pass protection broke down probably a little more than Michigan State would have wanted. But yeah, I agree that I think overall the offense, under the circumstances, played okay, but they just, you didn't finish and get enough points, and that's been the big issue is, red zone offense, settling for field goals, not finishing, and certainly not having Deion Sims. He's the number one target in the red zone. But even when Deion Sims was healthy, this offense was struggling to put points on the board.
Well, Joe, injuries on the offensive line to Fanati and Travis Jackson have forced a lot of shuffling. What was an area of strength going into the season is now an area struggling for continuity, isn't it?
It is. And, before those guys went down, I thought the offensive line was a bit of a disappointment. A year ago, they lost they actually lost Blake Treadwell and Skylar Birkland early in the year. Really were playing poorly, and then came together and played very well at the end of the year. Especially like in the Big Ten championship game and the bowl game against Georgia, really. And then you looked at that, they brought most of those guys back other than Joel Foreman. So you figure, this offensive line would finally be a big strength for Mark D'Antonio. I mean, it's been the toughest thing for him to, build, excuse me, to what he wants it to be. But, it was kind of disappointing, and then losing those guys certainly hurt a lot. I mean, Jackson, you can't overstate the importance of a center, making the calls and things like that. And I think Fonoti was not only maybe their best lineman, but probably their best leader up front. So definitely missing those guys right now.
At the midway point of the season, Joe, how do you grade out the performance of Andrew Maxwell?
It's tough. I think he's had up to the, I don't think he played particularly well last weekend. I think he just, missed some, again, you can look at the weather and it may have been a factor, but he just missed some passes and some reads that, you wouldn't have expected to do. I thought in the second half against Indiana, he played great. Now, of course, you can always put the Indiana defense asterisk next to that. But, even the Ohio State game, I thought he played pretty well in that game. Ohio State was flying around, and he put some passes in some tight windows in that game and had some of them dropped, and that's been a big problem for him. So when you look at his overall numbers, you have to take into account lots of drops from this young receiving core. I think he's been fine. I don't think he's been great, but again, pass protection's also been a problem at times. I mean, the whole operation has not been up to par. I would not put him at the top of the list of culprits.
No, I mean, the drops have been incredible. You can see one or two games, but it's really been all season until recently. I mean, Aaron Burbridge looks like he's the real deal at wideout, getting more playing time now. Deion Sims, pretty sure-handed. But that's been a real negative when it comes to the development of your first-year quarterback, that your receivers just can't hang on to the ball so often.
Yeah, and I mean, even going into the year, everyone said, well, how are they going to do with Maxwell in place of Cousins? And I said, well, my question, a bigger question to me is, Cunningham, Martin, and even Keith Nickel, who was sure-handed and a heck of a blocker. And you're right, that's the problem. I mean, if Maxwell could have had one of those guys still, that probably would have been a big security blanket for him. And I think Deion Sims has been that to an extent, but you still need a guy like that on the outside. So, like you said, Aaron Burbridge, from now on, I think he's going to be, a focal point, and he should be. I think he's got all the things you need to be a great player. And then after that, Keith Mumphrey had a good day against Iowa. Benny Fowler has had ups and downs. I still think very talented. I mean, they have guys who can make plays, but after Burbridge, there's still a little bit of uncertainty there.
Is Deion Sims going to be ready to go Saturday, or is that going to be decided later in the week?
Yeah, that's the question of the week, and they're not saying much. I get the sense that he's going to try, but I don't know if they're real confident that he's going to be able to be very effective. I mean, you never know. Obviously, someone could have dramatic improvement on Wednesday. You could wake up and it could be way different. But I think right now they're cautious and concerned that he's going to be able to move the way he needs to move in this game. But I guess I'd be surprised if he doesn't suit up and give it a shot.
Joe, overall the offense has struggled this year, as all Spartan fans have seen. But, so often when you watch them, it looks like they are so close to clicking. They just have not had a game yet where it has all come together for them, have they?
No, although I guess you could say Central Michigan. But, yeah, other than that, and even in that game, of course, in that game, Central Michigan absolutely stacked everyone in the box and said, we're not going to let Le'Veon Bell run for 250. And he only had like 70 yards. But, you couldn't help but, make some plays downfield in that game if you're Michigan State. But, it hasn't all come together. And, injuries certainly a part of that. But, I think, again, the offensive line, a little bit of a disappointment despite the injuries. And, Andrew Maxwell's receivers, it's going to take some time. But then, there'll be times when it looks like the chemistry's there, the route is there, the read is there, and, it's a drop, potential big play drop. And Benny Fowler dropped touchdown passes, against Ohio State and Notre Dame, and you don't get too many chances for those. So, yeah, it's going to have to be a day of just, pure execution. Of course, Michigan State fans are all over offensive coordinator Dan Rochar. It's, when the team's offense struggles, I guess it's kind of natural that the offensive coordinator is going to be the scapegoat. And certainly, I've never watched a football game and agreed with every offensive coordinator's play call, but I think fans are a little misguided there. I mean, this offense is what it is to an extent. It's a power offense, and if you can't run the ball at all to set up play action, you're really going to have a tough time.
Joe, over on the D, the Spartans did some shuffling due to injury on Saturday. Curtis Drummond started at safety for Jarvis Jones, Tywan Jones for Chris Norman at the outside backer, and James Kittredge for Micah Reynolds at tackle. Other than those big plays we mentioned at the top of the interview that the defense has been giving up this year, maybe fans even expected more, but this is still a pretty darn good defense, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it has speed. It's strong up front. In the back end, I still think very talented, very good, and for the most part, they don't give up a lot. But Johnny Adams in particular has given up some deep passes this season. He's been picked on a little bit and given up some real critical big plays, particularly the bomb against Ohio State. But he's given up a few others too. So that was one thing on the defense that was, an issue. I think the biggest problem and the biggest difference with this defense is that it misses Jarrell Worthy and Kevin Pickleman inside. Again, the guys in there are solid, but you're talking about playmakers, particular Worthy, and Worthy, a guy who would draw, demanded more attention from an offensive line, and I think that opened things up for the defensive ends. And this year, they're just not getting that push. They're not getting those plays. People would rip on Worthy and say, well, look, he took that play off or he's not consistent. But, I don't know, in the course of a game, he would make some plays. He would make some plays that not a lot of defensive tackles make, which is why I start in the NFL right now. I mean, that's a big thing, I think, the interior pass rush. But like you said, overall, it's tough. And I think, again, Iowa did nothing for 3 quarters and found some big plays. But it's a good defense. It's going to be interesting to see it against this offense. It's done a good job the last 2 years, but I also think Denard Robinson made some mistakes that were more on him than credit to Michigan State a little bit. And so I'm sure he's going to be looking to atone for that.
Joe, overall, back-to-back 11-win season raised the expectation of Spartan fans, which is a good thing. But once again, we're seeing that the combination of a first-year quarterback, injuries on the offensive line, and the inconsistent receiving core have sort of conspired, to dash those expectations. Do you think this team has the makeup and the leadership to move in a positive direction the rest of the way?
I think there's another great question and a big question, and I kind of wrote about that today, actually. Look, I mean, you heard so many times over the past couple of years just how special that senior class was, and in particular Kirk Cousins as a leader. And, so you have to assume when those guys leave, it's not just going to continue that way. And I don't look at this team, and it doesn't appear to be, a divided team or a team with a lot of infighting, but I do wonder if there are strong enough personalities in that locker room on that sideline to keep a team together in tough times. I mean, you could look at this schedule coming up, and you could easily see Michigan State being 4-6 in 3 weeks if some things don't change. And in particular, I just feel like there's a lacking sort of confidence with this team that it's going to get things done. And then I think that's huge. I mean, it's hard to exactly quantify those things, but I don't think there's any question intangibles have a big impact on a football game, despite all the moving parts and all the different jobs people have to do on the field. So that's a great question. I think they have some good leaders. I think, Andrew Maxwell's done fine stepping in. It's just hard to be Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was he was pretty special in that way. And then I think Max Boa is a good leader on the other side, and Chris Norman. But as you mentioned, Chris Norman now has been replaced in the starting lineup by Tywan Jones, who's playing really well. So does that take away maybe a little bit of his voice? I mean, he's got to be a little bit concerned about his own situation. So I think that's going to be the big test this week and beyond, because this team has to put everything together, and so far through 7 games, we have not seen it do that.
In Sunday's Free Press, your colleague, Drew Sharp, said those who actually appreciate good football with meaningful national consequences will look away from Ann Arbor this Saturday. Michigan is average, but Michigan State is awful. And I think that's overstating it just a little bit, but Do you think the sizzle is really missing from this year's game?
Oh, my guy Drew. You gotta love him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be overstating a little bit. Well, certainly, I think going into the year, I think so many of us are talking about, man, this could be the biggest Michigan State game in a long time.
Yeah.
And it's on the Big Ten Network. And nothing against the Big Ten Network, but, that tells you a little bit about where things have gone. I think, obviously, Michigan, couple losses early, they look good now. Michigan State is a big disappointment, let's face it. I certainly didn't pick this team to have 3 losses at this point, or near near losses to Eastern Michigan and Indiana. So yeah, some sizzle has been lost, yes, but I feel like this is always a good game. I still feel like these are 2 good programs. I mean, of course, Michigan's coming back under Brady Hoke, and I do think that Mark D'Antonio has a good thing going, and you got to try to keep this season respectable, I guess, but. The team should be very good next year as well, and they're doing fine in terms of recruiting and developing players. So I think there's going to be a lot of good games. This one, because of the Michigan State streak, I still think there's certainly a lot on the line here, and for everyone in this state, it's a huge one. But yeah, nationally, I suppose this might be one of those that gets about 3 highlight clips, and it's like the 8th one shown on ESPN. So. And that's mostly Michigan State's fault.
But for the future of both of these programs, maybe not as we've mentioned nationally, but in the Midwest and of course here in Michigan, for the Spartans looking to put it together and right the ship, and for Michigan to keep moving forward, this is a huge tipping point game. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's, if you're Michigan, of course, you gotta stop this streak, and next year you look at it. I mean, Maxwell is a senior. If a lot of things break for Michigan State with Michigan replacing its quarterback, you'd think Michigan State would have a chance next year to win, and so you want to end that. And I think for Michigan State, they're constantly battling that perception thing. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for Michigan State to be rivals with a program like Michigan, being an hour away from the winningest program in college football. So you're always battling that, along with Notre Dame, along with Ohio State, and you don't want to be perceived as, as sliding. And that could be the storyline with this team if things don't turn around on the field. So, I agree. It's absolutely a huge game for both sides.
Our guest today on our visitor segment has been Michigan State beat writer Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press. Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
All right, Mike. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the game. Thanks a lot.
Coming up next on Michigan Game Day, the associate editor from the Wolverine, Michael Spath. Here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Michigan Game Day this week, our guest is the associate editor of the Wolverine, Michael Spath. Michael, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here. It's going to be a fun week to talk about Michigan State, obviously.
Absolutely. It sure is a big one on the horizon. Let's start with a few quick thoughts, though, Michael, on Saturday's 45-0 homecoming victory. I'd like to get your take on a few things. Improvement from the offense, or was that tough to measure considering how bad that Illinois defense really has been this year and was Saturday?
Well, certainly if you can't have one without the other. You don't absolutely demolish a team if they're not suffering from, crisis of confidence, if they're not, a little bit weaker. But, let's give credit to Michigan. They said coming into the game that they wanted to run the football, they wanted to establish the line of scrimmage with, as much with Denard Robinson as with their running backs, because that's been an issue this year. And while Fitzgerald Toussaint didn't have a great day, The running backs overall had a pretty good day. They finished with 150 yards, and Thomas Rawls came in there and played well, and Justice Hayes came in there and played well, and then Denard did what he does. And he had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had a couple big long runs. So they got done what they wanted to get done. The passing game was above average for the second straight week, and Illinois, they had the pieces in place to be a great defense. They were a great defense a year ago. They ranked 7th nationally, and they brought 8 starters back. So the talent is still there. They're not playing as a cohesive unit, obviously, but I think anytime that you have a game like that, like I said, it's kind of a little bit of both, and I think you do have to give credit to Michigan's offense, especially the offensive line, because they've been hearing it from the fans and from the media for 5 weeks now that they can block for one guy but can't block for the other, and I think they were determined to prove that it's not on them, that they can get the job done for the running backs. And like I said, Bill Fitzgerald-Toussaint didn't blow the doors off this game on Saturday. He was better, and the running backs overall were much improved.
Over on the defensive side, Michael, even though the Illini were one-dimensional, quarterback Nation Shieldhouse, he's really their entire offense. When he went down, you knew they were going to have problems. But it was still impressive to see really how workmanlike the Michigan defense performed on Saturday, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I have a colleague that always looks at the glass half empty, and it's kind of annoying and obnoxious. And he said that. He said, "Oh, well, Illinois is so bad that's why Michigan had success." And I disagree with that. I mean, yes, they were bad, and they're not playing great football right now. But that said, the Michigan front seven has greatly improved since the opener against Alabama and the following week against Air Force. This is a team that the defensive line is now, first of all, they're engaging in blocks and holding those blocks and allowing the linebackers to flow to the football more freely, but they're also themselves disengaging from those blocks and starting to get upfield a little bit and starting to disrupt running lanes. When you've got a running back that is going to hit a hole here and a defensive lineman penetrates the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden you've got to jump that outside. Well, in the game of football where a play lasts 3-4 seconds, if you've got to take a full extra second to get to where you want to be, that defense is going to swarm and get to you before you can hit a hole. And that's what we've been seeing lately. And then every time that, a guy, gets past the line of scrimmage, it seems like Jake Ryan or Kenny Demmons or Desmond Morgan are there to make the stop. So I think this front seven has really improved and has really, become the strength of this unit. And then certainly the secondary, as you said, I mean, once Shieldhouse went down there, their quarterback situation with Riley O'Toole was not ideal. They don't have any wide receiver playmakers, but to hold a team to, I believe it was 29 yards passing. I can't remember the last time that's happened. And certainly this secondary, the quarterbacks, I'm really impressed. They're playing extremely tight coverage, which is something I think fans have been wanting for so long. They always wonder why guys are playing 10 yards off when they need 4 yards for a first down. And we're not seeing that this year. We're seeing guys up in their face, and the reason that they can get away with that is because the safety play is so consistent with Jordan Kovacs and Thomas Gordon that the corners, Raymond Taylor and J.T. Floyd, know that, say I'm in bump and run coverage here, or I'm playing tight on this guy and I slip, or the guy outmuscles me and I get beat. Well, he's going to have someone there to back him up. And when you have that confidence in your teammates and that belief that those guys are going to be there for you, that's when you can really accomplish great things, because you can just worry about doing your job and not worrying about doing somebody else's job.
Big win, very impressive Saturday. I think we all agree, and we're very happy despite the damp conditions we had to sit through on Saturday. Looking ahead, though, to this Saturday, Michael, I saw an interesting comment from Drew Sharp in the Detroit Free Press in Sunday's edition, and he said this week's game is only remotely interesting to those whose limited football universe consists of one or the other program. Do you think this year's game lacks in any sizzle or appeal?
Outside the state, outside the Midwest, I would say that it does. Certainly, to Big Ten fans, every one of these Legends games or Leaders games when they're in, within the division, I think are important, because if Michigan State, which was a preseason conference favorite, if they're going to get back in this thing, they absolutely have to win on Saturday. They can't afford 3 losses in the Big Ten, because 3 losses, is maybe as much parity as there is in the conference this year, I don't think 3 losses is going to win the Lighthouse division or the Leaders division. It's going to be a team that's at least 6-2, maybe 7-1. So, if you're a Big Ten fan, I think you care about this game. Certainly, if you're a Michigan or Michigan State fan, you care about this game. And I would even say that, the emotion is going to be at a frenzied, pace on Saturday for 2 reasons. If you're looking at this from the Michigan side, well, they've lost 4 in a row to these guys. This is their little brother, supposedly, and the little brother's been dominating. It's like going on a basketball court. I remember with my older brother, when I started beating him, man, did he used to get kicked off and throw that basketball around. And when he finally beat me again, I've never seen, because, he got so used to doing it, I've never seen the reaction when he finally beat me again. He was jumping up and down and getting in my face and talking trash. And I think that's kind of the same feeling that Michigan fans have. It's like, listen, it's time to reclaim what we've known our entire lives. They're going to be so geeked up and amped up for this game. And the opposite side, people can say that, Michigan State's down right now. They're 4-3. They just lost to Iowa, and this game doesn't mean as much. But that's, that's baloney, because if they want to have any chance of salvaging this season, they need this win in a desperate, desperate way. And certainly the way that they have beaten Michigan the last couple of years, shutting down Denard Robinson, posting 4 wins in a row, they have the confidence and swagger at least against the Wolverines. And they're gonna go into this game kind of feeling like, hey, even though we're the underdog, we know how to beat these guys, and that can make a big difference for the Spartans on Saturday.
Michael, even though we think the Michigan offense is improving, it still has really feasted on some inferior defenses, and it struggled against the very 2 good units we faced, that's Alabama and Notre Dame. In that regard, this week, it will be an excellent measuring stick for the offense, because despite some struggles, this Spartan defense is still really very good, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've watched the last 3 Spartan games, and especially this past week against Iowa. And looking even at that Indiana game, that second half, they really, really came to play and played well. And I think the front 7 is a little bit down this year. Jarrell Worthy not coming back. Obviously he had no choice, but he was a big part of that, because he was the guy on that front 4 that the team's game plan for, and drew their double coverage to. And now that's going to William Golston, and he hasn't been able to fight through it. So I think that front 4 is a little bit weaker than last year. But overall, the linebackers are still probably the Big Ten's best, with Max Bullock and Denikos Allen, and the secondary with Johnny Adams and Isaiah Williams at safety, are 2 very, very good players. And again, because they have that confidence, they've done this to Denard Robinson before. They've really been his neutralizer, his kryptonite, and so they're going to go into this game with a lot of moxie and confidence, and just kind of saying like, hey, we have done this before to this guy. We know how to stop him. There's more pressure on Denard than there is on us. I think that gives them an advantage, because for a team that could be lacking those necessary, mental tools that they need, they shouldn't be this week. And as long as you have some confidence in your ability, you can always kind of play above what maybe your physical talent is.
Against the Spartans, do you think, Michael, Michigan can be successful with the game plan like we've seen the last 2 weeks, run first, run second, and you throw enough to keep them off balance? Or is Denard this week going to have to throw the ball more for Michigan to be successful against this defense?
Well, my gut reaction is to say he's going to have to throw the ball more, almost take on the Alabama and Notre Dame game plans where they used the pass to set up the run. Of course, it was ineffective against Alabama, and against Notre Dame, it wasn't effective until they started throwing interceptions. But if you look at that first quarter, both on their first 2 drives, they moved down the field fairly easily. And then, of course, they had, they stalled out in their first drive. And on their second drive, Vincent Smith got picked off on that halfback pass. And those were huge momentum turns for Notre Dame, and then things kind of snowballed. But I think they do have to use the pass to set up the run. Now, that said, right now they have a lot of confidence in their bread and butter, which is running the football, running with Denard Robinson. And I think they're going to try to give that a shot and say, listen, if Michigan State can prove that, they can stop Denard again, they can hold him to minimum games, then maybe we'll move more towards that passing offense. But right now they're feeling so good about what they're doing in the ground game, especially with Denard, that I think it would be foolish to all of a sudden revert back to the Notre Dame game plan or to the Alabama game plan because those things were struggles and because this is working right now, and you got to keep on going with what's working and say, hey, listen, Michigan State, if you stop us, great, we'll give credit to you, but we're not going to not go with our strength just because you've proven in past years to have had success against us.
Over on the other side, Michael, despite their struggles this season, you still have plenty to worry about, I think, when facing the Spartan offense. Le'Veon Bell is a big, bruising running back. Aaron Burbridge looks like an exciting young receiver. He's got great hands, a big body, and he is a flyer. We all know that. And Andrew Maxwell, when I watch him, he's got a big arm and a great upside. To me, though, the key this week is to shut down this offense early in the game and try to somehow take Le'Veon Bell away from them. How do you see that?
I mean, that's exactly how I see it. I think if I was listening to the radio on the way over here to my office this morning, and they asked if, they're going to put 8 men in the box. And, I don't know if they have to do that. I think certainly Jordan Kovacs will come down into the box quite a bit at the strong safety position and add another defender. But, I think they just got to keep on doing what they're doing. I mean, they're playing so well as a front seven against the run. They want to take Le'Veon Bell out of this because they want to make Andrew Maxwell in this offense one-dimensional. And I agree with you. I think they do have some playmakers. I think Aaron Burbridge is really emerging, and because of his emergence, maybe that lessens the pressure on some of those other wide receivers that are dropping the ball. The big question this week will be is Deion Sims going to be back and healthy for this game, because he's a huge target at tight end. And he hasn't shown to have the drops that a lot of the other wide receivers have this year. I think this will be maybe a little bit harder of a challenge than people are expecting. That they've seen the Michigan State offense really, really struggle. But again, in rivalry games, I know they throw the cliche out that they throw the records out and blah 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 blah. But I think what happens in these games more than anything is guys they can forget what happened in previous games. They don't worry about the fact that they've struggled with their confidence in catching the ball and in running the football, and the offensive line has. Everything gets reset for this contest. And now what can happen is if you get to the half and a lot of the same problems that have occurred before rise up, well then, by the time you come out for the second half, you're starting to, those same issues are starting to creep in, and your confidence is falling dramatically, and now you've got an issue. But early in the game, I don't think that's the problem. And that's why this Michigan defense, you look at the last couple of weeks, and what they've done is against Purdue, they shut them down immediately. Against Illinois, they didn't give them anything. They had some key fourth down stops. The quicker you can take an offense out of the game, the faster they will crumble psychologically, and that's where this Michigan State team is too. Is if Michigan can take them out in the first half, say they only give them, one score, a field goal, or maybe a touchdown, I think then the second half just lends itself to a blowout.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, though, you talk to Michigan fans and you'll listen, they think, hey, this State offense is really, really bad. We have to take advantage of it. But, when I've watched them and I've tried to see footage of every game, I watch this offense and you can see what they want to do. And when I watch them, I say, they are a click away so many times from putting it together. And what I worry about is they put it together this week.
Well, and that's a great point. And it's interesting because on Saturday after the game, I was jumping over onto some of the Spartan message boards, and they were calling for Andrew Maxwell to get replaced. And admittedly, I didn't see anything beyond the fourth quarter of that game because I was outside with some friends doing some different things on Saturday before the Michigan game started. But I like Andrew Maxwell a lot. I've seen this guy play in probably 4 or 5 of their games now, and I think he is the prototypical pro-style quarterback with a little bit of ability to move around the pocket. And I think this guy, if his receivers were doing a better job, I think he'd be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now. And so when you have that in mind, and you still have Le'Veon Bell, and you do have an emerging wide receiver, and you do have a pretty good tight end, that if they could have some early success against Michigan, you never know. I mean, this could be a game where State all of a sudden puts up 35 points and people are blown away by this because they didn't think that they had it in them. But the one thing that I would say that is at the end of the day, you can't compensate for poor offensive line play. And certainly with some of the injuries that they have and the struggles that they've had up front, Andrew Maxwell could have a great game on Saturday, and Aaron Burbridge could have a great game, and Deion Sims and Le'Veon Bell could all bring their best. But if the offensive line is still a weakness for this team, and that has been the case the past couple of games, it's going to be tough to beat Michigan because those guys are so critical to everything you want to do offensively.
Michael, let's take a minute just to talk about the Michigan offense, if we could, and the direction of the offense now that we're at midseason. Do you think that we're closer to being the kind of offense that we want to be long-term right now?
I think we're further away from where we want to be as an offense. I think what you saw against Alabama, what you saw against Notre Dame, those two game plans, and what we talked about what they might bring out against Michigan State, is closer to what Al Borges envisions for this, and that's 50-50 pass run, using the passing game to set up the running backs, and going more with Fitzgerald Toussaint, and going more with the running backs, and keeping the ball out of Robinson's hands. But certainly the last 2 weeks, I think this was interesting, and I didn't expect this to happen, but for every throw that Michigan attempted against Purdue and Illinois, they had 3.4 rushing attempts. So essentially you're running the ball in 75% of your plays. And while certainly if in the future they could get away with that, if they could rush for 350 yards in a game and only throw for 150, I don't think any offensive coordinator is going to say no to that. But they want greater balance. They want to be able to throw the ball downfield a little bit more, and go to more pro-style, passing routes. And right now, the last 2 weeks, they haven't done that. They've relied, almost exclusively on the running game, almost exclusively on Denard Robinson as a runner. They have, kind of simplified his progressions instead of having, the four options every time. A lot of times, I mean, if you watch, he's dropping back and he's going through two targets now and then tucking and running. And so I think they're moving away from it, and I actually give them a ton of credit for that, because I think they came into the year thinking that Denard was going to be a significantly better quarterback in year two. That had kind of an MO of the Al Borges career, is that his quarterbacks always made dramatic improvements. And what they've said instead is, listen, our quarterback was struggling a little bit when we asked him to do some of these things, and we love Denard, and we're very proud of him and very happy with him, but we need to go back to what he does best. And so I think that this offense is a lot closer to what they were doing towards the end of last season in the Nebraska and Ohio State games, where they were almost run pass, 60-40, relying a ton on Denard Robinson's legs. And in that vein, that's what he knows, and that's where he feels comfortable with. And let's give them credit for that, because they could have been stubborn and said, no, we're going to keep on using the pass to set up the run. And instead they've turned around and said, all right, we're going to run, and we're going to use the pass intermediately here, intermittently here, just to keep defenses off balance a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. Well, Michael, over on the other side of the ball for Michigan, if the trend continues, the improving Michigan defense could be what drives the team to a divisional title, maybe even a trip to Indy for the Big Ten championship game. Coach Madison's defense, though, appears to be getting better and better each week, doesn't it?
It sure does. It really has. Now, again, they've played a Purdue team that had some confidence coming into that game. It just won the previous week. It scored 50 points in back-to-back games, and they shut them down completely. So I think that was a better sign than this past week against Illinois. But you look at it in Michigan State, they've got, as we talked about earlier, because that team will have some confidence coming into this game, they've got to go out there and shut those guys down. And then next week will be a big test, because even though the Nebraska defense doesn't look very good, the Nebraska offense looks very good and is multidimensional, and they're going to have their hands full with them. And then down the road, they're going to have Northwestern and certainly Ohio State are going to be some teams that they're going to have some trouble with. And but if you're going to look at the next 6 weeks, if this Michigan defense comes to play like they have the past 2 weeks, you really, really have a great shot to beat Michigan State this week, to beat Nebraska, to beat Iowa, Minnesota, and Northwestern, and really set up a scenario where this team could be 7-0 going into that Ohio State game. And I really like the emergence of Jake Ryan. He's a huge playmaker for this defense, and the one guy that that we kind of had written off earlier in the season, he had gotten replaced by a true freshman, is Kenny Demmons. He has I mean, I've honestly been surprised. I've been hard on him this year, saying that he's, it's time for him to just kind of cede his starting position entirely. But he has been really, really good against the run, and even better in pass coverage, dropping into soft spots in the zone. We saw that play on Saturday where Brady Hoke said that he had done so much preparation and film study that he knew exactly what the route was, dropped perfectly, and then when Riley O'Toole threw it over the middle to his tight end, there was Kenny Demmons with a really, really impressive interception because he caught it with his hands. A lot of times linebackers catch the ball with their chest. It just kind of hits them right in the chest, and then they just wrap their arms around it. But he stuck his hands out there and caught that almost like a tight end would. And so he's really improved, and because of that improvement, I think the sky's the limit for this group.
Well, Michael, we keep talking about swing games this year for Michigan, and to me this Saturday's game, for so many reasons, would be the biggest of these. As you just mentioned a moment ago, a win Saturday sets the stage for a big trip to Lincoln a week from Saturday night, and games that look winnable right now leading up to what they're calling the Michigan Bowl down in Columbus. So despite what some observers say, this game really is a tipping point game for both teams this Saturday, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, if Michigan State wants back in this race at all, they have to win. There's no doubt about it. I mean, because they've got a tough schedule coming up. They've got some other teams that they're going to have to face that, that are not going to be easy on them either. And if they go to 3 losses on Saturday, they're done. I mean, we can just write them off. They'd be 4-4. A lot of problems on both sides of the ball. They have to have this one. And for Michigan, yeah, I mean, you look at it, and not to take anything away from Iowa because they've certainly played well enough to win a couple games in the Big Ten, and in Northwestern has won a couple games, and that offense looks pretty good. It looks like one of the better Northwestern offenses. Minnesota has shown a little bit of improvement. Not to take anything away from those teams, but if Michigan beats Michigan State, then you look at the Nebraska game as potentially, maybe the only other game on their schedule until that Ohio State game where it's 50-50 or they could lose that one. And if they go 6-2, I think they still have a really good shot at playing for the Big Ten title. And certainly if they go 7-1, they're going to play for it. There's no doubt in my mind they'll play for it because of just what that'll mean in terms of giving everybody else a conference loss. So this is a huge game. I mean, I think last week it was said perfectly to me by former All-American Ron Simpkins. He said you can't look ahead to the next week because when you want to win a Big Ten title, every game matters, and you can't have 1 loss or 2 losses on your record. It's not going to happen. So he said, look at the game in front of you, take care of business, and that allows you to go into the next week with the same goals and same ambitions that you had from the very start. And I think that's how you have to look at this game. And certainly there's more riding on it than just that, but Michigan has to take care of business this week, and they have to take care of business next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. There's no game that they can say, hey, we can lose this and still win the Big Ten title. And I think that's the big thing this week and going forward.
Our guest on Michigan Game Day this week has been the associate editor of the Wolverine, Michael Spath. Michael, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks again to Michael Spath, the associate editor from the Wolverine, for being our guest on Michigan Game Day. Coming up next, we wrap it up for another week with Wolverine Quick Hits here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, let's check the injuries heading into Saturday's game. Stephen Hopkins will be back after missing 4 games with a hamstring injury, and Vincent Smith, also suffering from a hamstring issue, should be good to go against the Spartans. Coach Hoke said at his Monday presser that other than the usual bumps and bruises this time of the year, the team is in great health. Here are some quick facts for this week's game. Michigan leads the series with 67 wins against 32 losses. there have been 5 ties. Last year, the Spartans won in East Lansing by a score of 28-14. Coach Mark D'Antonio is in his 6th year as head coach and has a 44-22 record with the Spartans. They run a pro-style, multiple-set offense and a 4-3 defense. The Spartans beat Georgia in the Outback Bowl 33-30 in overtime and finished the year ranked number 10 in the nation. They returned 15 starters this year, 5 on offense, 8 on D, and 2 special teams players. Key players to watch this Saturday for the Spartans are running back Le'Veon Bell, first-year quarterback Andrew Maxwell, and exciting freshman wideout Aaron Burbridge. On defense, the Spartans are led by Max Bulla and Danico Sallin and Isaiah Lewis and Johnny Adams in the secondary. Don't forget to become a member here at GBMW. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Benefits include email reminders when a story is published or a mailbag question is answered. You also need to become a member for full participation on our always interesting message board. As a member here on GBMW, you can also take part in our popular Monday night live chat with E-Rock Wolverine, Coach BT, Maze Man, Doc for Blue, World's Wolverine, and our hockey guru, now that hockey season is underway, Yoastmeister. The Monday night live chat takes place at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so check it out. The show is now available as an Android app, which can be purchased from the Android App Store at Amazon.com. If you're an Apple person, you'll find our app in the Libsyn toolbox at the iTunes App Store. If you listen to the show on your Apple device, please take a minute to give us a review. It helps a lot. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your comments. If you'd like to have your Maize in Blue opinion heard, give us a call at 313-263-4842. Then leave an audio with your thoughts on this football season, the upcoming basketball season, hockey, recruiting, anything that's on your mind. Just give us your name, where you're calling from, and then take off. If you'd rather send us an email, our address is the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. I will post the email address and the listener line number on my show notes. I welcome your thoughts and suggestions on anything Maize in Blue. Thanks again to our guests today, Spartan beat writer Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press and Michael Spath, the associate editor at the Wolverine. Don't forget kickoff for this Saturday's game is just after 3:30 p.m. and can be seen on the Big Ten Network. If you aren't at the game or don't have BTN, you can also tune in to Frank Beckman and Jim Brandstetter on the Michigan Football Network. Next Wednesday, we look ahead to another crucial road game test for the Wolverines. A night game down in Lincoln against Coach Bo Pelini and his Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Huskers might be struggling this year, but they don't lose at home very often. It doesn't get any easier, does it? So don't forget to join us next week for more of the best in Michigan football coverage. Until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, enjoy the game this Saturday, and as always, until we meet again, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!